Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we will discuss on a topic which is in microeconomics, or I can say it is in general economics, that modeling in economics. Okay, you must have heard about many models, right? Harrod-Doman model, demand supply model, Keynesian model, so many models. Today we will learn about that what are the basics of modeling and what is to be required while modeling in economics. Okay, so let's start. First is, let me start that what does this, why we need to model it. Okay, first is why we need to model it. So the reason to model is that understand the complex reality, right? You see, in economics, we are dealing with so much complexity, right? Like, for example, in an economy, there might be a high growth, okay? But unemployment is also high. So, okay, sometimes your interest rate is also very high. And, or you can say that sometimes people save less. So many things are happening in the economy. So our first objective is to examine or to see the complex reality of the world. Okay, it's a complex reality of the world. Once we build a model to understand the complex reality, then we have to interpret. Okay, then we have to interpret different real world data. Okay, the model we have built, how actually it is fitting to the real world data. Once we have that, then we will be able to make predictions, right? For example, if we see the phenomenon, and we model it, and we also find that the data that is provided actually is very useful and actually it is fitting to the model, then we can predict it. Why we are predicting it? Because once we predict it, okay, then we'll be able to make policies, right? Just imagine that during COVID time, whenever there's huge uncertainty, okay, what is going to happen in the economy, no one knows what is the direction of economic activity. No one knows actually. It is very, very difficult. Or you see, like, for example, what will happen to the inflation in the next few months, what will happen to the growth. Okay, so based on that, you are going to formulate the policy, right? Whether it's monetary policy or it's fiscal policy or anything, for you need to have a vision over the time, okay, in the next few years or few quarters, then you formulate the policy. For that, model is also very, very, very important. Okay, so what you learn, that model is to understand the reality, then fitting the data, then make predictions, and then formulate policy. So these are the most important parts. Okay, these are the most important parts. Okay, in the modeling. Second, sometimes I say that model is very specific. Model is very specific. For example, you see this movie DDLJ, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. So in this movie, what happens? This movie shows the conservativeness of parents, okay, for the love marriage. So the objective of this movie was to examine or to show to the society that how conservativeness matters in the society. Okay, so the objective is different. So they try to, in the movie, they try to model that one. But if you see the Thappad movie, okay, in the Thappad movie, it's completely different. It's completely different, because here the objective is not to see the conservativeness, but here it is to see, I mean, to so that how a woman is treated by her husband in an environment of like there's a party was going on and something bad thing happened to to her husband, and her husband just slapped her in front of the everyone, relatives, family, friends, colleagues. So before, I mean, in front of everyone, he slapped it. So how much this person actually, what happened, actually respecting this woman. And here it is showing in details it's showing how the conservative is the parent. So these two movies, okay, these two movies have different objectives. They're explaining different social phenomena. Okay, so a model is actually exactly like this. So, like for example, if you are showing like your aggregate demand and aggregate supply, right? So in an aggregate demand and aggregate supply, suppose this is demand, this is supply. So you are deciding how much quantity you will sell and what is the equilibrium price. Correct? Similarly, in another model, like suppose for example, think about in the game theory. So in the game theory, you are deciding, okay, person A, person B, they are deciding which strategies to play and what outcome will happen. So this is the way. This is the way how people actually model the economic behaviors or the economy. Okay, I just related this to the movies, how movies actually they have a specific objective. Similarly, models have also their own objectives. Okay, so now let's go back to our economics. Economic models. In economics, always remember that there are two main principles in economic models. This is two main principles in economic models. Okay. First is optimization. What is optimization? In economics, we assume that agents maximize their profit. Agents maximize their profit. Like for example, if you are a firm, then you will always try to maximize your profit. If you are a consumer, will always maximize your utility or your happiness by consuming the goods. Okay, like similarly, if you were a bank, then you will always try to maximize your interest incomes. Okay, so any agents you take in economics, they try to maximize their payoff. Okay, if it's a negative payoff, they also try to minimize it. For example, like in some models, like in a CAPE model, okay, you must have heard about CAPE model. People don't like standard deviation of a stock return, right? They don't like risk. But however, they like return. So their preference is like this. So they don't like risk, but they like return. So they try to maximize here. So I just gave you some ideas that in economics, always people maximize their payoffs. Okay. Now the second principle is equilibrium principle. What is equilibrium principle? In equilibrium principle, demand and supply actually are always same. Okay. So if something happens, then they match actually. Then from that matching, you will get your price and quantity. So here price actually in general sense. For example, if it is a goods case, okay, like suppose this is the demand for potato and this is the supply of potato. So this will be your equilibrium quantity and this will be your equilibrium price. Similarly, if this is the amount of total savings available in an economy and this is the demand for credit, so this will be your amount of credit, okay, amount of credit or amount of loans, and this will be your interest rate. So in goods market, your equilibrium happens and decides price and quantity. In loan market, it also equilibrates besides amount of credit or loans and interest rate. Okay, so you understood that in economics, these two principles always work. Okay, optimization and equilibrium. Okay, so all of you clear what is all of you clear what is optimization and what is equilibrium. Okay, so equilibrium can happen in goods market, also can happen in financial market. It also happens in labor market. How it happens in the labor market? In a labor market, this is the demand for labor, the supply of labor. Then this is your amount of labor employed, and this is your wage rate. All of you got it? So this is the way how models are actually work in economics. So how many types of models are there in economics? One is theoretical model and another is empirical model. What is theoretical model? In a theoretical model, see, these models are based on economic phenomenon. Okay, this is based on economic phenomenon like utility model, CAPM model. Okay, so these are depend on some economic phenomenon. Sometimes they use mathematical notations or mathematical formulas or mathematical techniques to model certain economic behavior. Okay, to model certain economic behavior. Sometimes this can also be very abstract. Okay, like for example, if it's a social choice theory, okay, in the social choice theory, the models are very abstract. For that, you need to have a very strong mathematical background. Okay. So first, it is a economic phenomenon. It is derived. It is maybe mathematical nature. It is abstract. And the ultimate objective of this theoretical model is to explain the phenomenon. If something is happening in the economic sense, then this model tries to explain that why it is happening. Why it is happening. Okay. So all of you understood what is theoretical model. Then what is empirical model? Empirical model, from the name itself, it says that they are mostly empirical in the sense they are mostly data driven. So you need to have a data to build the model. Once you have a data driven, first, okay. So then this is hypothesis building. How you build the hypothesis? Based on your your economic theory or from the observations you build a hypothesis. Once you build a hypothesis, then you validate that hypothesis, okay, with a theoretical model by using some statistical techniques. Okay, so empirical model is data driven. It is just building the hypothesis, then testing the hypothesis with the theory using some statistical techniques. So this is the difference between theoretical model and empirical. All of you got it? So this is theoretical model and empirical model. In economics, in the modeling, also there's two types of variables that we encounter. First is endogenous variable, another is exogenous variable. Okay, so what is endogenous variable? Endogenous variables are those variables which are determined by the model. For example, if it is demand and supply, so this is a demand, this is the equilibrium quantity, this is the equilibrium price. So this price and quantity are endogenous variables. Price and quantities are endogenous variables. But suppose like this is the demand for potato, this is the supply of potato. Suppose suddenly the income of the households increases. So instead of this demand, they may increase demand to this. So here the income that increased, okay, this that shifted this demand curve is exogenous because it is the income is not determined by our model. Our model just determines equilibrium price. Okay, like it was initial, now it is final. That is Q1, and this is P1. So all of you got it that. So our model is just explaining price and quantity, not income. So income is here exogenous. Okay, and prices and quantities are endogenous. Okay, similarly, if you take like labor market, this is the demand for labor, this is the supply of labor, then this is your equilibrium labor, and this is your equilibrium wage. Now, if suddenly sometimes a very good technological progress and that increase the labor demand, then now your next labor demand will be L1, L dash, and this will be your wage dash. So your wage will increase, your labor employment will increase. So wage rate and labor employed are the endogenous variables here, and some technological progress happened, that is your exogenous variable. So all of you got it. What is endogenous variable? These endogenous variables are dependent on the model. Like in this model, it is price and quantity. In this model, it is wage and labor. And if you take the financial market or in the loan market, this is interest rate and amount of loan. What is exogenous variable? In the exogenous variable, I have already discussed these variables are not determined model, but they are outside the model. Like income, technology, they are outside the model. They are not determined by the model. And these models are used for comparative analytics. Like if some shift happening, what happening to our prices and quantities. If there is a shift happening in the labor demand, what's happening to wage rate and labor. So they are used for this comparative analytics. All of you got it? So endogenous variable and exogenous variable, and this is the difference. Now, in the theoretical modeling, what happened, as I discussed, that first you have an abstract, okay, abstract thing, then you interpret with the problem. Okay, something you have in your mind, okay, and you interpret in the model. So once you think that, okay, this is the problem, this is happening in the economy, or this is an issue, or this is a phenomenon, this is a phenomenon. So you mathematicize it. Once you mathematically model it, then you solve for the sum. So there are a lot of equations, a lot of stuff in mathematics. Then once you get, again you go to the solution. Once you find the solution, you match with your abstract thinking whether it is perfect or not. Okay. Then what happens if your abstract and your matching happens? Then you go to the real world problem and you go to the real world data. Then you simplify and validate the model that you have built here, whether it is working here. All of you got it? Okay. So this is the case how it happens. So first, observe the economic phenomenon, mathematize it, then solve the model, then fit with the data, then validate the data. So these are the steps how you need to build a theoretical model. Model, mathematical equations or mathematics, then solve the model, fit the data, and validate whether this is in accordance with your real world problem. So this is theoretical modeling. What is empirical modeling? In the empirical modeling, you first formulate the hypothesis, right? First you see the like you see some economic theory, or you see some theory, then you, based on that, you form some hypothesis. Then once you form the hypothesis, then you what to do? You choose proper data. Then you choose proper data so that you can validate your hypothesis that you have derived from the theory or from the observation. Then once you have selected, okay, I will now this is the observations I have made from the theory, and I have the data. Then according to that, you have to choose appropriate statistical techniques. Appropriate statistical technique to validate the hypothesis. Okay, to validate the hypothesis. Once you see, so once you have data, you have hypothesis, you have proper statistical technique, then whatever the results you get, then you conclude whether whatever the hypothesis that you have derived from the theory is working or not. Okay, so then you conclude about the theory and conclude about the phenomenon. Okay, so now I think now all of you clear that what is the difference between empirical modeling, theoretical modeling, and all those things. Okay, so what I've discussed now, finally we have discussed what is model, that is to understand the complexity, to interpret the real world data, make predictions, and formulate policy. Then we have discussed what are the two main principles in economic models. Then we have discussed what is a theoretical model and what is an empirical model. Okay, once we have this, then also we have discussed that what are the endogenous variables in a model, what are the exogenous variables in a model. Then you have discussed the theoretical modeling, how you are actually modeling the things in a theoretical sense, and concluding the economic phenomenon, economic observations. And we have also discussed some empirical modeling and how empirical modeling is used based on the data, based on the statistical techniques to validate the theory. So there's a famous line by George Box, actually, all models are wrong, but some are useful. Wrong, useful. Are you getting what this is? Wrong in that sense, because all models will not explain everything. And sometimes, because every model is a function of time and space. What is time? Your model may valid in certain time, your model may not valid in certain time. And your model may valid in certain country, and it may be invalid for certain country. So your modeling is a function of time and space. At what time you are actually this model is working, and what region the model is for which economy the model is working. So, but some of them are useful. Of course, they are useful, right? Because suppose just imagine there are no models in economy. How can you predict? How can you make policies for policies for the future? So models are important, but they may not give you the 100% results, or they may not incorporate all the things that are happening in the economy. But however, they will be useful in predicting certain kind of variables that may be interest to the policymakers. Okay, so this was the what I can say. This was the some small, introductory to modeling in economics. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this video. Okay, see you again.